we were in negotiations.
Investing in real estate, they're winning, they're making money.
What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Real Estate Educators Podcast, where we provide the education you could build on. I am your host, Kevin Amos. This podcast has been so much fun and is unlike many that I've seen because we help real estate investors and real estate educators. And that is especially true today. So if you're a real estate investor or you are educating real estate investors, creating content, this is the podcast for you. If you haven't yet, please help us out. 5-star review, share with a friend. You have no idea how much that actually helps us get this content out to more real estate investors just like you. So today, fantastic guest, Mr. Mike Litton. Now, Mike, all the guests that I've had, you are up there when it comes to experience. 32 years of real estate real estate experience, investing, lending, buying, selling, brokering, and you are an educator. I know that you're a coach. You have your own podcast, tons of experience. I know we want to talk about all of that. Welcome to the show, Mike.
Thanks, buddy. It's great to be here. And we are live on TikTok. This is totally cool. Really appreciate it. I loved having you on my podcast, and I'm super excited for everything that we're going to talk about. It has been 32 years, and they probably should have put me out to pasture a long time ago. I've overstayed my welcome by probably a couple of decades, but I certainly have had a lot of fun, and I've loved every second of it. So,
this is fantastic. So it's my job here, Mike, to try to extract as much value from that brain of yours to help our listeners the best we can. So let's see if I could do that. Let's take me back, man. 32 years ago, you were getting started in real estate. I want to hear how it happened, but before that, why real estate?
Well, that's a great question. I always had an interest in real estate. I had an interest in real estate from a fairly early age, and particularly development. Right. I loved watching buildings go up and projects being built and all that kind of thing. I loved all that. And I ended up getting hurt. I've literally never told this story before. So this is a scoop for your listeners. I ended up getting hurt at work. I was working my way through college at the time, and I was in my early 20s. And I was checking groceries, and it was 11 o'clock at night, and I'm scanning groceries. And you know how you scan, you pull the groceries across, and I grabbed onto a cantaloupe. And you know, cantaloupe has kind of a rough exterior to it. And I grabbed it with this hand, transferred it to this hand, and these two fingers in this part of my hand didn't feel the cantaloupe. And it was sort of an interesting sensation, right? And I kept working. I thought, oh, I just fell asleep. Kind of like when you sit on your foot, on the couch and it falls asleep. It'll come back. It didn't come back. So about 30 minutes later, it was time to count out and report, turn my till in and all that. And I reported to the manager. I said, hey, it was the number 2 guy in the store. I said, hey, just so you know, this happened. And he goes, what do you want to do? And I said, I'm sure it's going to come back. Let's give it a few days. And a week later, it was worse. And I went back to him and I said, I need to go see whoever the company doctor is. So they send me to an urgent care. And this is where God gets involved. Okay. I go to this urgent care and I walk in, and the guy who's normally there is on vacation. And one of his best friends from medical school is filling in for him. And the guy happens to be the head of emergency medicine for Madison Square Garden in New York, and had been there for decades. And I walked in and I told him the situation, and he goes, well, we're going to order you off work. You're not going back to work. And I said, whoa, Bubba, hold on. You have absolutely no idea who you're talking to. Give me whatever pill I need and get me back in there. We don't do this. We don't do this, write me off, I'm not going back to work thing. And he goes, listen to me. He goes, I used to put, and I forget the name of I just lost the name of it. He used to fight. He's a professional fighter. Anyway, when this professional fighter used to fight Sugar Ray Leonard, he would get all banged up. He would go to this guy, and this guy would put him back together. He's like, don't think for a second you can bow up on me. And he ordered me off work. So he orders me off work. And if for anybody that's ever been in the disability workers comp space, I worked for a company who shall remain nameless that was self-insured. And the manager of the store, who was not the one I reported to number two, the manager of the store reported to corporate that I did not do this at work, that it was not a work-related injury, that I did it somewhere else outside of work. That made it so that I couldn't get workers' comp. And so in order to get even disability, I had to go hire an attorney that the union provided to me. It's the only thing the union ever did for me. The union provided me an attorney. I hired that attorney, and she went and got me my back disability. I lost my apartment. I nearly lost my car.
Oh,
I mean, I was, yeah, and I was going through school at the time. I couldn't afford school anymore because I was literally paying my way through school. So everything in my life at the ripe old age of 20 just absolutely stopped, right? It was done. And I was in the system for 4 years. So for 4 years, they watched me, they followed me. It's crazy, man. I mean, it's hard to explain what that was like. In the process, though, I end up getting together with a buddy of mine that had run our night crew, and I had been on his night crew. He's one of the managers from this company. And I reached out to him and I said, hey, there's an opportunity here. What do you think? And he said, look, he goes, I'll put the money up, you go do it. So I go out and I go to work with a distributorship, a company that basically sold us a distributorship where we were Apple resellers. And we were one of the single greatest thing we were selling was real estate investment analysis software. It was the coolest thing on the planet. And it only worked on the Apple Macintosh. So we sold Apple Macintoshes and this software together. Had an amazing time. And what it did was it furthered my love of real estate. Now I'm dealing with $20+ million projects, right? I mean, it was one of those really cool experiences. We're in escrow on this deal that they had been in escrow on for over 2 years. It's a $22 million medical research facility in San Diego. And I'm literally cooped up in their conference room running analyses because their lender is asking for a different, tweak this number because we did a 10-year pro forma. At one point, the commercial broker goes storming out the door past the conference room, goes outside, lights a cigarette. And she's standing out there doing this. She's upset.
Just
something
like so.
Really,
for the listener, he's shaking his hand. So like she's scared or
he's literally right. She's shaking, right? She's trembling. And I walk out and I'm like, are you all right? And she goes, Mike, whatever you do, you're going to end up in real estate. I'm convinced of it. Go into residential. This commercial thing is awful, right? And she goes back they end up canceling escrow. Very long story, and I won't bore you with it, but they end up canceling escrow after working on this thing. She worked on this thing for 2 years. I worked on it for a month, right? She was really into this thing. So long story short, I end up finding a property that is a fixer, and it's in VA foreclosure. So the VA is literally foreclosing on this property. It's in Escondido. It's on Rachel Circle. I really, really wanted this house and I wanted to buy it. And I was 21 years old at the time. And I went into the local commercial bank that had been referred to me. The loan officer had been referred to me, and I applied for a mortgage. I got turned down. And he wouldn't help me turn a no into a yes. He wouldn't return my phone calls. How I found out was I got a form letter in the mail. By the way, if you're a lender, don't ever do this.
Yeah.
I got a form letter in the mail. I walk in the bank branch with the form letter, and he goes in the back and hides. I go to the branch manager, who I assume is his boss, and I'm like, hey, can you help me? And she said, I've never done a home loan in my life. The only person in this branch that can help you is him. I'm like, well, can you go get him? She goes, he won't come out. I mean,
this is the strangest story ever.
I'm a big guy, and I'm kind of loud, and I'm really intense, but I'm not going to hurt him.
Right.
Right. Would not answer my questions. So I go to talk to my dad because when life doesn't make sense, I talk to my dad. And I said, this happened. And he goes, I thought you were too young to buy a house anyway. But he said, I don't know why we're having this conversation. And I said, okay. He goes, I raised you, remember? Yeah. He goes, and he pointed out a story. When I was 8 years old, I didn't make a little league team that I wanted to make. It was the best little league team in the entire city. And I made him take me down to the sporting goods store that was the sponsor. And I confronted the owner of the sporting goods store, and I wanted to know why I didn't make his team. And so he told me. And I spent every single day from that day forward doing everything that he told me to do. And the next year, I was the #1 baseball player in the city. I went from not making his team to being an all-star.
Sounds like the book that I just recently read called Grit.
Yeah. Well,
you have that.
It was one of those things where I just wasn't going to take no for an answer. And so my dad said, I raised you, remember? You never taken no for an answer in your life. Well, I took that to mean I needed to go get my real estate license and I needed to get into the mortgage business because I knew I could do better than that guy.
Did you ever find out why you got denied?
Yeah, I did. I found out exactly why.
Why?
I was selling software and computers. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
These software computer systems, I was selling bundles. And so they would show up on a pallet at the person's office, all shrink wrapped up with a Macintosh computer in the deal with a carrying case and the whole thing. Right. And those cost 5, 7, one of them was 10 grand. Well, in order to do this, I had to pay for them myself off of my credit cards. I had to pay for them myself. And then I was reimbursed from the company once the company was, the company was built, right. And so the customer was billed, the customer paid the company then reimbursed me. Well, I was waiting for reimbursement and I had probably $40,000 or something like that outstanding. And I explained to him, I said, I've been reimbursed. I made the payments. The actual balances are zero. But when you pull my credit, because back then credit took a while to be updated, you're going to see a bunch of debt on there. It's all zero. And I have perfect credit. I had not a single late on anything. Okay. And I still got declined for excessive obligations. Turns out if he had spent an extra 10 minutes, Kevin, and given me the benefit of the doubt, you spent an extra 10 minutes verifying what I told him to be true, I'd have been approved. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
I got into this business.
Motivated you because now I could see right now, Mike, you are angry.
Yeah.
Like this pissed you off.
Be careful saying no to me. Right.
It's a great motivator. I know it's probably not the most positive motivator, but like hearing no or like revenge per se is a great motivator.
Well, it wasn't revenge. It wasn't revenge. It was
I can show you. I'm
going to show you.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
That is a powerful motivator.
Yeah. And I was absolutely convinced that I could do a better job than this guy did. Okay. And so I go to work, I go and get my license. And I'm telling you, I brought it. Everything I do, I bring it. Like I just blow people out of the water. So there was a company that was a real estate school where you could go and you could do these practice tests so that you could practice taking the state real estate exam. Back then they didn't have mortgage licenses. And so you got a real estate salesperson's license. Okay. In 1992. So I'm taking these practice tests. There's 16 of them. I took every single practice test until I got 100. Every single one. Okay. And the lady because you had to go up to the lady at the front desk and turn it in, and then she would grade it. And then, right. And so I would walk up and she'd go, honey, you only need a 70 on the test to pass.
I did the same thing with my securities license.
Yeah, you do not need 100% on this test.
But I want to be sure.
Now, I wanted to be positive. I wanted to be done before everybody else. I wanted to ace this sucker. I didn't even want there to be a chance that I wasn't going to pass this thing. Okay.
You and I are the same.
Oh, dude. So I went overboard. Sure, whatever. I was the first one done. And when I walked up, I literally walked up, handed my test to the proctor, and the proctor said, "Oh, you don't feel good? You have to finish. You have to stop. You have to stop." And I'm like, "No, I'm done." I was walking out, and the daggers I was getting from the people's eyes in that room, dude. Oh my gosh, right?
Peace out.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, it was crazy. So, yeah, so I get into the business. My very first month in the business, I decide that I'm going to process my own loan. Don't do this. If you're in the mortgage business, don't ever do this. So I process my own loan. I get it approved, and it's 8 other lenders had turned them down. And if we hadn't gotten it approved when we did, 2 weeks later, they were going to lose their house to foreclosure.
Oh man.
Their dream home that they were building. Okay. So we get it done. The underwriter calls my manager, the gal that owns the office, and she says, "I'm approving this on 2 conditions. Number one, whoever the processor is that processed this file, fire them. They're beyond help. And number 2, tell Mike Litton to lose my number. I never want to hear from him again." Now, that second condition, that same lady 2 years later was trying to recruit me to a mortgage bank that she was the head underwriter for. True story. And
I
she
believe you,
became
yeah.
mom. She became mom to me. She
So,
made
like
me refer to her.
Okay. So
as
mom is like, she turned into a mentor of yours?
Absolutely.
Oh,
Mentor, defender, I mean, protector. She was everything you can possibly imagine to me.
so
We
we
lost
all
her to
need
cancer
mentors, Mike.
several years
This
ago.
is
But she
one
was
thing we all have in
amazing.
common on this show. What I've been learning on the however many I've done. Everyone has a mentor. Everyone has someone they look up to, someone that helped them, took them under their wing. My story is no different.
Yeah.
So how did you find this mentor? Kind of sounds like you stumbled into it, but I want to hear, like, how did you identify that?
Well, it's a very long story, but I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest version.
Give me a
So,
2-minute version.
yeah, so I'm working for a mortgage broker at the time that the first mortgage company I ever went to work for was a mortgage broker in San Marcos, California. And they announced a year later that they were leaving, and they were shutting down, moving everything to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. And they wanted me to go with them. They wanted me to move to Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. My family's here in San Diego. I'm not leaving. Okay. And so I talked to people around me, and they all said, you need to go into the mortgage, but you need to go into the mortgage banking business. You need to go to work for a direct lender. So I found a direct lender, and I'm literally working with this direct lender, and I'm in a real estate office, and this gentleman pulls me aside and he says, "Hey, walk me out to my car." I get halfway out to his car, and I'm like, "Joe, whatever I did, I won't do it again. Please don't kick me out of your office." He goes, "I'm not kicking you out of my office. Will you come here, please? I'm saving you." Okay. So I go over there, and he goes, "You're going about this all wrong. All the top people, all the industry captains of the mortgage business, captains of industry in the mortgage business, are former builder reps. Go find one of the top 5 mortgage banks in San Diego County in production. Go to work for them, direct lender. Go to work for them and get on their builder group. You need this experience." Okay. So I went to work. I found the number one, because number 5, top 5, the first 4 weren't going to happen. So I went to the number 1 mortgage bank in production, called him 61 days in a row, including Sundays and holidays. No callback. I tried to get into BNI, tried to get into LaTip, all this stuff, couldn't do it. I ended up creating my own referral group. I found a stockbroker that worked for Merrill Lynch, and we formed our own referral group. And he mentioned to me after our first meeting, he said, "Hey, by the way, we're a national sponsor for Ernst & Young's Entrepreneur of the Year Award. If there's anybody you're trying to get in front of that won't return your calls or won't, talk to you, nominate them as Entrepreneur of the Year. I'll call them and give you credit."
That's genius.
Right? Who do you think I nominated?
The banker. Yeah.
He calls him the next day. Within 30 seconds of him hanging up, this guy calls me. He goes, "Where are you right now?" I said, "I'm in Vista." He goes, how soon can you be in my office in UTC? I said, 30 minutes. He goes, leave now. I go down there. I walk in. The receptionist says, he's expecting you. I'm supposed to take you into the conference room. I walk into the conference room. I sit down. He walks in. He goes, what do I need to do right now for us to be in business together?
How about you return one of 61 phone calls?
So I go to work for him. Okay. And I tell him, I want to be on the builder side. He goes, my cousin runs the builder group. I'll put in a good word for you. For the next 6 months, I pound on this cousin. His name's Joe. Joe will not let me in the builder group. My assistant who came to work with me is fired by that manager. That assistant goes to work with a golfing buddy. The guy was on his golf team in high school, goes to work for a competing mortgage bank that he works for. Turns out it's the number 2 mortgage bank in San Diego County in production. And his very first day, the guy that's running the branch said, he takes him to lunch and they sit down and he goes, who's Mike Litton? And he goes, well, Mike's a fire breather. He's incredibly intense. You've never met anybody more intense in your life. And he will not quit until he absolutely dominates you. And he said, and he wants to be a builder rep. He said, wait a minute, we're starting a builder group here. Do you think he'd talk to us? And he goes, I'd call him if I was you, because he will not quit until he beats you. Because I was competing with this manager.
Okay, I want to get into this grit. Okay, because this is very, very good. Okay, but quickly, close the loop on the mentor.
Yeah. So I go to work for this builder group. Okay. The very first assignment that I have, because the whole idea is they have builders that they know and they can get me in. Very first builder is a company that is building their second project in San Diego County. And they are literally in the information center because their models aren't done yet. I walk into the information center and there's laughter from his belly. This guy's laughing in this information center. And it's Joe, the guy that wouldn't let me in the builder group.
Yeah.
And I walk in and I'm like, hey, Joe, how you doing? He goes, man, I go, why are you laughing? He goes, you're wasting your time. You're never going to feed your family spending time here. I have a written agreement with this builder. I'm going to get 70% plus of all the deals here. By the time this is all said and done, you're not going to get any production from here. I'm like, well, I appreciate it. Thanks, Joe. Joe walks out the door. The door doesn't even finish closing. And the manager, the sales manager goes, come here. I go over to her desk and she says, I haven't sold a house with an FHA or VA loan in over 10 years. And I couldn't tell the builder that or they wouldn't have hired me. I can't trust that guy because he has a written agreement with the builder. But if you'll come out here when we know he won't be out here and educate me on the FHA and VA guidelines, I'll make sure you get your share of the business.
And she was the mentor.
She was another mentor. Okay. And I ended up with almost all of phase 1, almost all of phase 2. And Joe comes out to see me and he goes, hey, I have a written agreement with this builder and they're violating it. I'm like, Joe, I can't help you. He goes, if you and I don't work something out between us, I'm going to have to go to the builder. I'm like, Joe, I can't help you. You're going to have to go talk to the builder. He walks in and talks to the president or vice president of the division. And he goes, you're not living up to your deal. And he goes, you know what? The last 2 months, I've gone out to that sales office and all I've heard is Mike Litton this, Mike Litton that. By the way, when I go out there, Mike Litton's there. He's helping. He's making things happen. I'm not hearing a thing about you. So here's the deal. You're no longer the lead lender here. In fact, you're not even a lender here because we don't do whining. So there's the door. I'm going to call Mike right now and let him know that he's our only lender. I think he'll be okay with that.
Wow.
That company was a company by the name of D.R. Horton Custom Homes. 4 years later, they were the #1 developer in the world, #1 home builder in the world.
Yeah, I've heard of them.
And I was their #1 lender in San Diego County. I was doing 70% of their loans.
This is an amazing story. This episode is brought to you by Pine Financial Group. Pine Financial is a private lender specializing in short-term rehab lending to real estate investors. Got a property that needs some love? We can help. We are able to offer funding solutions because we raise private money from individual investors. With more than 15 years of experience, Pine offers passive investors an alternative that provides stability, consistency, and security to your portfolio. If you like real estate but want to avoid the ups and downs and effort, a Pine mortgage fund could be a perfect fit for you. Accredited investors will experience an 8% preferred return and profit sharing. Diversify your portfolio out of Wall Street and into Main Street with a Pine Financial Group mortgage fund. Get more information at pinefinancialgroup.com. That's pinefinancialgroup.com. So let's see, how can we help our listeners with this story? So obviously, obstacle, overcome, obstacle, overcome, obstacle. I hear that through your story. So what makes a lot of people hit an obstacle, Mike, and they stop. So what makes you different?
I think it's because I'm a Nimrod. I'm just not smart enough to take no for an answer.
What's motivating you? Help me out here.
I know what I want. I know where I'm going. Like in the case of this builder group, right? Joe had pulled me aside and said, I've known you for 2 weeks, and I don't know you that well, but I know you well enough to know that you want to be the best of the best. You want to be the person that everybody looks to and says, that guy is mortgage banking. He literally just sang my song. Okay. And he said, listen to me. I've helped people just like you, not quite as intense as you are, not quite as talented as you are, make a fortune in this business and become a captain of the industry. This is what you have to do. So I took what he told me and I implemented it. I went to work. I figured it out. Now, was I told no a lot? Yeah. But I wasn't going to take no for an answer. I don't think I'm smart enough to do that. And so I just keep going, right?
So are you born with this?
Probably. My grandfather used to brag about me. He used to tell people that I'm like a steam shovel. You just point me in a particular direction and you tell me to go, and I don't stop until you tell me to stop.
All right, let me ask this a different way, because I'm trying to get to what the motivation comes from. So let's say there's a listener listening in, and they want to have some of the success that you've been fortunate enough to experience. But they're going to have some obstacles. So how do they get past an obstacle when they hear no, 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 no?
You figure out a way around it, or you figure out a way through it. And ultimately, every time somebody says no to me, it just motivates me that much more. I'm going to turn that no into a yes. I'm going to figure out how to turn that no into a yes. And what's interesting is, in this podcast that I have, we just did episode 202. So episode 202 was this morning, right before I joined you. And I've been interviewing people that have reached the pinnacle of success. I mean, unbelievable success. And every single one of them has something in common. And that is that people told them no. People told them they couldn't do something, and they just figured out a way to make it work. I know for a fact that I was born with determination. I know for a fact I was. Okay. It's just kind of the way I'm made. But I also was raised by somebody, and I'm talking about my grandfather, but I was raised by a man. And I always say, when I say raised, I literally mean I was out on the farm when I went from the time I was like 2 weeks old. My mother had me early. She was 19 when she had me. She was 18 when she got pregnant. And my grandparents, her parents, had wanted to send her to college and pay for college and have her get through college before she got married and had children and all that. So they said, listen, we're still going to pay for college. You go to college Monday through Friday. You bring the baby out to the farm. We will watch him. We will take him Monday through Friday. You take him on the weekends. You go to school during the week. So that's what happened. I was out there. We became our own little family unit. So when I tell you that my grandparents raised me, they really did raise me on a farm. And what I learned from my grandfather was a sharecropper. And he he made it halfway through 8th grade and he had to quit school because he had to go to work supporting the family on the farm, which he did. And he had an opportunity. He was 18 years old when the Great Depression hit. So he literally lived through the Great Depression, got married during the Great Depression, the whole thing. Had an opportunity in the 40s to buy a property, a piece of land, a farmland, in northern Oklahoma. He was from southern Kansas. This piece of farmland was under 3 feet of water. It's kind of difficult to farm in 3 feet of water.
It's kind of hard to do anything.
And so all the neighbors basically laughed at him. They thought this was the funniest thing they'd ever seen in their lives. Well, my grandfather got this property because it was underwater. He got this property for pennies on the dollar, as I'm sure you can imagine.
Underwater is a whole new meaning to me now, Mike.
Yeah. So he took a 2-bottom plow and his, really, really small tractor, and he dug ditches. This man with an 8th grade education dug ditches that would allow this property to self-drain. Then he could farm the land. Well, when he bought the property and he was digging the ditches and draining it, it had 11 oil wells on it. The oil wells were owned, and the mineral rights were owned by a big, what then was a smaller oil company that was coming up in stature. They were growing, and my grandfather ended up being approached by a representative from the company, and the guy came out and he said, "Look, I'm only here because you're the landowner, and we have to tell you this. We're contractually obligated to tell you this. We're getting ready to cap all the wells. We're going to take the pumping units off. We're going to take the pumping units. This right?
Yeah.
Take the pumping unit off. We're going to take the tank batteries off. We're taking all the equipment with us. And by the way, once we're done, you can farm over the roads that we've built." So Granddad's like, "Okay, well, what would it cost if you just sold me the mineral rights and sold me the wells, the actual equipment, versus you taking it off?" And he said, "I don't know, but I'll go ask." And so he goes back to corporate. He comes back and he gives my grandfather a number. And my grandfather's like, "What do these things yield per year, right? In terms of barrels of oil." And so the guy shares it with him. And they were calling them stripper wells at the time. Well, to them, it was a stripper well because they had hit much larger, they'd become a much larger company.
What's a stripper well?
Much larger wells. A stripper well is basically a well that isn't producing anymore. It's run its life.
Got it.
Okay. So it's done. Okay. It's basically salvage. Okay. Well, for what it would cost them to actually salvage all this iron, take everything off, all that, Granddad ended up buying this from them, including the mineral rights. So to give you an example, this is in the 1950s. In the 1970s, we had the oil embargo and all that kind of thing. Granddad made $193,000 on one oil well.
In 1 year.
In a year.
Yeah. Amazing.
Okay. Now, not all the rest of them produced that, but it was the number one well that he had in production, and it made $193,000. So you can imagine he had 10 others, right?
Yeah.
And they were producing too. So not as much, but they were producing.
And this is way before the 9% inflation. So that was actually worth significantly more money.
Absolutely. And my grandfather basically was a sharecropper who became a millionaire with an 8th grade education. But he was a man that didn't take no for an answer. And I grew up in the shadow of that man.
So you have an advantage, some would say, over someone that's trying to get started right now.
Oh, yeah.
So I know you're a teacher, you're a coach. So Mike, how do you help your students or clients reach some level of success today?
Well, it depends on their situation, and it depends upon what it is that they're willing to do to achieve whatever success they want. Success is something that anybody can have. Anybody can be successful. I don't care who they are. And there are lots of stories out there of people that are not necessarily all that well spoken or all necessarily that smart or right? But they go out and they figure out a way to succeed. The biggest part of success is just being determined. you absolutely have to be determined that you're not going to take no for an answer. And you figure out a way to make it work. And so the first thing we do is we sit down and do a needs analysis, and we figure out what sort of level of commitment and dedication they have. Because some people talk a great game, right? That they really want this, and this is a big deal and all that kind of thing. Okay, so why don't you share with me for a second why it's so important? Why don't you share with me for a second why you're so driven? And by the way, usually what happens is we usually find out that they're not quite as dedicated or committed as they think they thought they were.
Yeah.
And it's something we can work on.
So do you work on that, or do you weed that out? Because maybe,
Really work on it.
Look, some people, a W-2 job, job, is the right move for them.
Yeah.
That it's not everyone's an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
Because look, sometimes it really sucks. Let's just be honest about it. It's hugely rewarding. So please, I'm not trying to discourage you, listener, but sometimes it sucks. It's worth it to me and to Mike and others, but maybe not everybody, right?
Well, it depends. So it depends on sort of what your frame of reference is, right? And what you consider to be success. Okay. And it also depends upon the thing that affects your frame of reference is what's happened to you in the past, what's taken place, right? And there are a lot of people that feel like that life happens to them, and then there are a lot of people that feel like that life happens for them. And sometimes it comes down to what your perspective is.
That's right.
Okay. And yeah, there are times when, and by the way, just so we're clear, if you go out and do something that's outside your comfort zone, it's going to be outside of your family's comfort zone too. And your family is going to be saying to you, no, 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 no. What are you doing? Okay. First mortgage company I ever joined, I called my mother and I said, hey, I'm in the mortgage business. And my mother said, great. What's the salary and what are the benefits?
Yeah.
Well, first of all, there's no salary and there's no benefits.
That's right.
You're out of your mind. You'll be bankrupt in 6 months. That same woman worked for me for 18 years at my Keller Williams office. And the mortgage income that I made was what made that office. The thing that paid for the office, the thing that paid for everything that made that a company came from the mortgage business. The same business that she was trying to protect me from.
Right.
Okay. You are going to have people tell you that it can't be done. You're going to have people tell you that you shouldn't do this, that you're out of your mind, that you're taking too much risk, you're all these things, right? They're trying to protect you. It's coming from a place of love. It sounds like criticism, but it's coming from a place of love. There's this thing called the amygdala that's in your brain, and it's your fight or flight mechanism. I learned this from Chris Voss, by the way. Never Split the Difference.
Yeah.
Big, huge Chris Voss fan.
Me too.
This amygdala is a gland in your brain that tells you whether you should fight or flight. And it's protection. It literally has protected us all these thousands and thousands of years, right? As a human race. That little thing in your head tells you you're taking too much risk, tells you you're outside your comfort zone, tells you that, instead of going for a run this morning, really your knee's been bothering you, your left knee's been bothering you, it's been really tender, we should take today off. It says the same thing tomorrow, but it comes up, it's your back, it's whatever, right? We really shouldn't do that. Well, there are people in this world like David Goggins and Jocko Willink, right? That when that little voice, and Tony Robbins, when that voice comes on,
Dude, it is on. It's on.
Go, right?
All right, Mike, we got like 4 more minutes here. So I want to hear about your podcast. So tell us quickly about the podcast. What is it? How's it helping you?
Yeah. So the podcast is the Mike Litton Experience. We're up to 202 episodes. We're in 38 countries. We picked up Morocco yesterday.
Wow.
Of all places, right? We're having a lot of fun. We have some of the most incredible guests. Like we had Sean Merriman on twice. Sean Merriman is a perennial Pro Bowler that was one of the best football players in the world when he was playing.
I'm a Bronco fan, so I don't like him so much, but he sounds like a great guy.
Right. Yeah, he's awesome. Marquez Colston, we've had on. Nick Edwards. Do you know Nick Edwards? He's the physiologist for the Avalanche.
Oh.
We've had some I had Jeff Hoffman on the other day, who's the co-founder of Priceline.com. And Jeff has an amazing story. So what we do is we get people's life stories. So Jeff comes on. Jeff was born in Arizona to a single mother of four with 3 jobs. His dream was to go to Yale University. He gets into Yale. He shows up. They tell him he can't go to school there. He hasn't paid his tuition. He can't pay his tuition.
Oh,
so they kick him out. Instead of leaving and going back to Arizona with his tail between his legs and going to community college, Jeff decides to move into the basement of Yale University, starts a software company, and uses the proceeds from that software company. By the way, he's not a programmer and he's never written any software in his life. Starts a software company and uses the proceeds from that, for the earnings from that software company, to pay for his Yale education, and has a degree from Yale today.
Yeah. And you know why? Because he heard no, and he used that to motivate him.
That's the running theme. If you look at anybody who's produced anything in this world that was memorable and markable, or, a big deal, they took no and they turned it into a yes. And they didn't do it just once. They did it their entire lives.
All right. I got one last question. Then I want to hear your contact information. Of course, reiterate the podcast. Also going to go through a quick recap of what I'm getting out, or what I got out of the episode here, Mike. But my final question is, what was the injury? Your fruit injury on your hand.
It was,
so you lost.
Have you ever heard of carpal tunnel syndrome?
Yes.
Okay. It was what's called ulnar tunnel syndrome. So so see the zipper?
Yep. So he's showing us a little knot on his arm.
Yeah. So there's a zipper here. There's a scar here.
So where we had some surgery. Yep.
Yeah. So what they did was they went in and they took my funny bone.
Those guns.
This is your funny bone. They went in and took my funny bone. I'm not even flexing. They went in and took my funny bone out of the ulnar tunnel because it was filled up with what's called calciferous fibrosis, or scar tissue, and it was shutting off the blood flow to the ulnar nerve. They put my funny bone up here.
Oh my goodness.
So it's up here, not in the tunnel. And not long after I had my surgery and I had healed, my dad walked up to me at a party and he squeezed my hand, my arm right here.
Mm-hmm.
And I just reflexively went like this, and I nearly knocked him out. He felt the wind from my elbow across his face.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad you recovered. I know that sounds like terrible. It was a pretty invasive surgery, it looks like.
It was pretty bad, but it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
It's your story.
Because it was all I did for 4 years was I was told no.
Yeah.
For 4 years, I was told no. By the time I was out of that system and had my knee operated on and my back worked on and my elbow surgery and all that, by the time I was done, I was like a caged animal, man. I was ready to take on anything. Just say no to me. Just bring it.
All right, Mike, how do we get a hold of you?
You can reach me if you go to my LinkedIn, probably the best way. Just look up MikeLitton and on LinkedIn. All of my contact information's on there. By the way, if you're in business and you're on LinkedIn and somebody clicks on contact info, your contact info, and it's a linked in link, that's a problem. You're putting them on a loop. Your contact info should be on LinkedIn so that people can contact you.
Yeah.
Not send you back to your profile. Why would you send them back to your profile?
You must have come across this. I have not seen that, but it's common.
It's really bad. It's very common, and it needs to change.
Maybe I will need to go to my LinkedIn right after this and double check.
People need to put their cell phone number on there. They need to put their email address on there. They need to put their contact information in the contact information screen on LinkedIn. It's really a big deal.
I'm going to go look at that right now. All right, well, let's wrap up here. So here's what I'm going to write that one down here. Mike, hold on, listener, for 1 second. LinkedIn contact. I'm writing it down in my notes so I don't forget it. Okay,
Everybody
here we
needs
go.
to do this, by the way.
Everybody needs. Stop what you're doing. Go to LinkedIn and check out
right.
your contact.
That's right.
All right. So here's what I got. There's obviously a theme here. No motivates, right? But I wrote down, don't tell me no. So that was your response to me when I said, how did you get all this grit and all this motivation? Figure a way around or through any obstacles. This is the advice you were giving to us. Use no to motivate as you did it in your own life.
Mm-hmm.
Don't take no for an answer. I wrote that one as well. How bad do you want it? So this is something that you sit down with your coaching students or your mentees, and how determined are you? And you know what it comes down to, Mike? It comes down to your why. So why are you motivated to do this and accomplish this? And then finally, LinkedIn contact. Don't put your potential clients in a loop. Make sure that your contact is actually on the contact screen. So anything else? Last words of wisdom from the master here?
One last thing.
Let's hear it.
If all of us have had a number of mentors in our lives that pulled us aside and didn't have time to do it, but they made the time to do it. They pulled us aside and they said, hey, you're going at this wrong. Instead of going this way, go this way. In honor of all of those people that have helped you your entire life and have helped me my entire life, if you come across a young person who's going the wrong direction, stop, spend some time with them, pay it forward. Pay it forward.
I love it. It reminds me of the song by Tim McGraw, Humble and Kind, I think is the name of the song. So if you haven't listened to that, hugely inspirational song, at least in my life. So, Mike, I really, really appreciate the 45-ish minutes here we've been on together. I know we went a little bit long, but you had some fantastic content, some fantastic stories there. So again, thank you for joining us on the Real Estate Educators podcast. To the listener, reach out to Mike. I'm sure you could learn something from him. Check out the podcast. I was a guest on the podcast. I could tell you it's amazing. So go check that out. And I want you to please make this day a great one. Thanks, guys. Hey guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode as much as I did. If you did, please be sure to follow and leave us a review. Oh yeah, and tell a friend.